Hi there, and thank you for clicking on this video. Today we're going to be covering the Miter Incarnon, which was a requested build. Pretty good upgrade. The Miter Incarnon is, well, the Miter originally was used as a utility weapon to one-shot nullifier auras, right? Or the spheres, or where it gets rid of your abilities. So it was generally used as a utility weapon. The Incarnon can still be used as that. Frankly, the DPS in terms of like a new meta upgrade, if you will, it does a ton of damage. All of the Incarnon weapons do a ton of damage. But the fact is with a couple of exceptions, and I'll go over them, two main ones. The damage is just a tad low. You can get some pretty monster slash procs out of it. Like, you can get it into the millions easily. But the fact is if you're expecting like a Latron, um, or even like a Magistar, where it hits and like it's going to be your go-to weapon for like level cap, if you will. This probably isn't going to be it. Its redeeming quality is actually its crowd clearing. In terms of killing enemies, there is a way you can sort of gimmick it to be able to get more damage out of it. And it's actually not that bad. So let's go over the build, the couple of builds. It's not going to be too long of a video. There's two main ones. There's the gas build, and again, because this is an Incarnon setup, there will be no Nubra build. So the build that we're going to be using is we're going to set it up for gas on the AoE. We have equipped Prime Firestorm just to get the AoE up. It's where most of the damage comes from, and because this weapon has as much status as it does and crit chance, we are going to be leaning heavier into the AoE and crit tiers. We will be able to hit reds pretty consistently. It's not going to be pure reds, but we're going to be able to get, I think, like 280%, which is good enough, right? Especially with a 7.3x multiplier. If you are missing any of these mods, hopefully not the galvanized mods, because this is a steel path weapon. But say like Prime Firestorm, or you don't want to use Bane of Grenier, you would do a hammer shot, a little bit more crit multiplier, brings you up to 9.2, which is kind of insane that that's becoming like a standard crit value with these Incarnon weapons. But this would be a more general build. We are going to go with the gas build mainly for this. I'll discuss the slash one. But there's probably the biggest quote unquote like secret I've found with this is its interaction with Zadas. You can essentially keep the Incarnon mode up permanently because Zadas does count as an extra hit, and I'll show you how to use it. It's really niche, but it is good for keeping the alt fire up as much as possible, even though you can effectively only get it, or if you can effectively get the alt fire in like 2 hits at most. But let's go over a little bit about the weapon, because it does have sort of unique characteristics. Its main multi-shot, if you will, is almost completely vertical. Like here, we only have one. Let's kill some enemies so we can see what the actual multi-shot looks like. Because honestly, it's pretty good. Let's get some stacks. Alright, easy enough. So when we're looking at the multi-shot, it's almost completely vertical. You can see it a little bit easier. I don't know if the bitrate gets rid of it, but the multi-shot on this is actually almost completely vertical. So it is pretty okay to shoot just above the enemy's head, so you clip them with the bottom one. And if you're using Zadas, this actually helps you out a ton. And I'll show you what the mechanic is. It's actually kind of interesting. So with Zadas, because I just turned it on, it's incarnon charge in one hit. And if you look at the buffs that I have, like I don't have any stacking buffs except for the headshot that I just got. So of course, when I'm shooting, let me try to get it stacked up. If you shoot over their head, you can get the incarnon bonus really easily with this, because the multi-shot doesn't go everywhere. If you shoot above and get Zada's Whisper, it'll immediately pull everything down into it, right? And if you're going deadhead, this allows you to hit your multipliers a little better. So when you're doing a gas setup and you're trying to go for like a deadhead multiplier to get your damage up, you actually want to shoot above the enemies. And it will make getting the headshots way easier. Like to the point where AoE clearing a bunch of them is pretty damn easy. And the combination of Zada's triggering on the head and the AoE, you can sometimes RNG headshots between enemies because Zada's will drag the the bouncing glaives to other headshot points if Zada's is triggered on them, right? So it's a coping build, but I haven't had any problem choosing it. The only thing that I really don't like about this is honestly galvanized scope. Personally, I did like what was it, like 45 minutes an hour on like a conjunction survival with a gas build, and it was just mowing down enemies. I would actually recommend Firestorm on this because of the bouncing of the glaives. They bounce, I think it's like 4 or 5 enemies. This actually ends up being a pretty good multiplier, even though the range is so small. Because if you shoot at the enemy coming straight up into you, all of the glaives will obviously hit that enemy. You know, hot takes only, right? But if you shoot the enemy, but then they'll RNG bounce into everything behind it. So if you're trying to get as much damage out of the incarnon mode as possible, I would honestly recommend that. If you don't want to run Zadas, then get rid of Deadhead, and the damage is perfectly fine. Galvanized Aptitude, even though we are using the AoE a lot, because the glaives are homing, Galvanized Aptitude ends up doing a ton of damage, giving you a really strong damage boost. And again, there's no Hunter munitions. If you don't want to use Prime Firestorm, put Hunter munitions here. And the slash procs will do pretty nutty damage. As is. It's just, this weapon doesn't really have like too hard of a gimmick. I was hoping there would be something where it's like an infinite incarnon mode or something like that, but it seems to be the multi-hit from Zadas is probably going to be the closest that we can get, because it counts as extra damage, and it can charge the incarnon mode also. Like what, not quite like the Fenmore used to, where you had the infinite incarnon mode, but because of the Zada's multi-hit, if you're aiming above them and you're getting headshots, Zada's can pull everything down onto a headshot, and it will basically recharge the incarnon instantly. So you do have the option of doing that, swapping out Hammer Shot for reload, which is even more damage, or even more effective damage, because you're going to dump the alt fire, the incarnon mode, and instantly swap back into it. So let me show you that real quick. So even though we're running dots, we're going to try to run as few as possible. We're going to do gas so it gets headshots, right? Because all of these guys are the same height. Even though Deadhead is kind of bugged right now. Let me back up a little bit. If it doesn't kill all of them. Alright, there's an instant charge. And you see it's instantly recharged. So you're dumping the incarnon mode. You're completely unloading it, aiming above the enemy. The homing takes effect, and because the glaive is above the top of the enemy, it has a really good chance of hitting the head. And as it goes through and bounces, the AoE will be at head level from Zada's, which has a pretty good chance because of the way the glaive works, right? The glaive AoE can potentially trigger not Zada's itself, but the glaive AoE from like the explosion can hit headshots. Not the bonus, but it will hit at head level. And Zada's will proc on that also. Right? So it'll bounce, it'll anchor Zada's onto the head level, which will then drag the glaives when they bounce to the new enemy to the head. And when they bounce around, they will be at head level. Ideally in a RNG chain, right? So this is probably the biggest meme with this. And I've tried running, I didn't do a super long run, but it was like 20 minutes of conjunction survival on a gas build with like a really quick reload. Like I even put like the prime reload on to make it as fast as possible. And it just pops right back into incarnon mode most of the time, but you have to shoot over. The only thing I didn't like is you can get reds out of this. And there is sort of a range that it has to meet. So if you shoot too far over, it won't hook onto them. But if you're shooting into a group of enemies, you should hit it pretty quickly. So Deadhead is pretty easy to proc, but to get way more damage out of it, I have tried running Galvanized Scope, and you're not going to be able to stack it up to 5 instantly. But once you get it stacked up, after like 2 or 3 incarnon rounds, it's almost all red crits. And this is the highest DPS that I've noticed. Because red crits on gas with that high of a multiplier is super freaking nice. Even though it's gas. You know what I mean? I just don't like the aiming. I mean, obviously everybody, when you have things like the Latron out there, right? So reload, aim up. Our Incarnon's reloaded. And you can see we procced the crit multiplier. Another crit multiplier. Now we're getting... Oh, and we got a third one off the gas proc hitting the head. And if you're aiming above on Zada's, even though it's anchored to say something maybe a little lower, it's like a mag bubble, right? Where it will try to drag the projectile toward wherever it is. And if it's like shoulder height and you're shooting at the top of Zada's, it can still get drugged down and hit the head, right? So you're still going to be proccing headshots. And this is the highest DPS version that I've found in terms of like bullet hose DPS. Okay, so pretty basic. Lots of conditionals, but if you're willing to aim and you just want to have like a high DPS, super relaxing run, it feels pretty good at times. So let's talk about the slash build. Slash build is going to be pretty basic, just taking advantage of the multipliers that are innate. So galvanized chamber, galvanized aptitude. Obviously want some crit, if I can spell it right. And then we'll do faction. And to be honest with the incarnon mode, not gonna lie, this is kind of all you need. I've had some pretty good fun running around with the one-tap build, where you just run around looking for headshots. And because of how ammo efficient it is, you really don't need prime sniper ammo. So you effectively have 3 flex slots here. You could go triple vigilante, because punch through seems to be kind of bugged on this weapon, even though it's got a huge punch through on its own, 2.5. It seems like it would be more worthwhile to just get the status up as much as possible. So vigilante armaments, hunter munitions, vigilante fervor. If you're running acceleration, you can swap out for hammer strike, which I wouldn't be able to slot. For more status, actually, I can do a rank 8. Because slash is heavily weighted on the IPS. The hammer shot would just end up being a fairly decent bonus. And then with the crit, you would also have the chance of getting slash from hunter munitions. And obviously it would just be gravy with the projectile hit from the incarnon mode itself. And to be honest, you would kind of be throwing away the heat dot. Crit would help it. The base damage from Merciless would help it. But you're not doing really anything to boost it other than that. And let's see the damage on that. Because to be honest, it is pretty impressive. So 120... Oh, I got a Panzer. Hold on. So 48, pretty standard, 68, 130, 122, 318, 421, 530, 436, 465, 592, 318, 570, 648. So there's some slash procs to be had if you enjoy the charge effect of it. The only thing I can say really about that, actually, let's do the incarnon first. All right, 100 and was that 125k? 640 or 604. 27k, 129. 114, 136. 130. So it's pretty to be expected. The only thing I would say, when I was testing this, it's not a big bug. Okay, it's not a big bug. But when you're looking at this, you have to realize the charge shot is significantly stronger than what the tooltip says. I haven't seen this mentioned in any of the creator videos, but we tested it on when I was streaming the other day. The charge shot is significantly stronger than what this is letting on. I have the 77 damage incarnon. Yeah, let me talk about the Evos now, because there is a little bit to pay attention to. There is a multi-shot incarnon here, which gives you, 57 damage, and then it's plus 20%. Okay, that only applies to the multi-shot. That's pretty common knowledge. The bonus is additive to faction. Okay, so if you are modding for faction regularly, that 20% isn't as effective as you want it to be. And if you do want to, I would recommend in this circumstance to go with the slash build that I just showed you. It does better than the higher base damage, because unless you're helminthing gloom on everything, channeled ability, how many actually have that? Let's be honest here. So if you want to do the charged headshot thing where you just run around and one tap everything. Listen, it's a good time, right? In this circumstance, the build that I just showed you with the slash, you would go with the other one, and you would never go into incarnon mode, because the multi-shot, when it pulls from ammo, pulls from the incarnon mode. So if you have 4 multi-shot, every time you shoot a glaive in the incarnon mode, it takes 4 ammo. Right? So the initial fire, which is normal, but when I'm not using it, like right now, that multi-shot one where it pulls from the magazine, I'm getting 20 shots times my multi-shot number of glaives. So I'm getting a shit ton of them. If I use the one with multi-shot, it pulls from the magazine, and that means I only end up with like 5 shots. I wouldn't say it's worth, but it does do more damage though. So if that's important to you, like say you want to do a level cap setup, like if you want to do a level cap setup, that's kind of where you gotta go. So even though it's only 20 damage less, it does turn that 55% prime faction mod essentially into a 75 faction mod, right? And it's a general faction mod, so it's like roar. So it's up to you if you enjoy clicking or doing the charge shot thing. But okay, let's talk about how the tooltip's bugged. Okay, so this says increased damage by 77. If you look right here where it shows 100, this is its original base damage, or the base damage of the weapon unmodded. It boosts the damage by 77, and this counts as the new base damage. Your serration is going to scale off of it. So like plus 165, you see 429. But what's bugged about it, it's not a big deal, they will fix it, is the charge shot says 250. 327 is only 77 more. The weapon performs correctly. And this is part of the reason why I'm actually going to recommend the slash build, the little meme build where you run around and just fully charge and hit stuff. Because this says 327, but what it really is, and let me pull up a calculator, is when you go from 100 to 250, it's 2.5 times the damage, right? Because 100 times 2.5, it's 250. What this number down here actually is 177 times 2.5. So this is actually your base damage on the charge shot, which is not bad. Okay. You can even go with the AoE evolution if you choose to do this build as well. Just throwing it out there. I wouldn't though, because you want the other evolutions. But this bonus down here, or the base damage on the charge shot, is way higher than what it's letting on. So it isn't too much coping. But I would say go with the slash build. Enjoy your 100k, 200k, 300, 600k slashes. It's a good time. and if you stay in uh, the regular mode and don't use the multi-shot, or if you choose to, just mod for Merciless and be ready to reload, right? So the fact is the slash build is way more potent than you would normally think. The headshots are super nice because the slash damage bonus, if you will, on when you get headshots, you get the 3x multiplier to your damage, and then because it's pretty regularly a crit, you will then get the additional 2x for a total of 6 times damage on those slash procs, making them nice and juicy, right? So the slash build, honestly, as annoying as it seems, is honestly probably the way to go. And you would just do like Vigilante Fervor here if you don't have acceleration. Or even like a Vile Acceleration. Something like that. And you would run something like this for your damage. Because you're going to get the high status chance that you get with this, plus the big multi-shot on it, on a weapon that's already weighted slash. And this would allow you to dive in more and get those slash procs more regularly. So it kind of is what it is. I like the gas build, but admittedly the slash build is just way more effective. Like an acolyte pops in, charge up a shot, bonk it in the head, and basically just walk away and watch it bleed out. Like there's nothing like more satisfying than that, where it's like you just drop like you hit the acolyte and then you just walk away and it just dies, right? But the gas build, even against 200 230s, is still pretty strong, even against armored units, because there's just so much AoE triggering. Because you have the 155 status chance on the gas build. The AoE can trigger gas as well. So as the glaives go through and bounce, they are triggering 1, sometimes 2. It's pretty even, right? 155 status chance. So you're basically proccing a gas tick and a half, a little gas AoE and a half, in an AoE to everything in like 4 meters and change. And let's see exactly what that is. It should be about here. So like here, everything in this circle gets procced with a gas tick at the same time when the gas procs triggers, which is the AoE. So it just ends up being a bunch of damage compounding. And once you hit the first enemy, the glaives basically become like accurately homing. If you have too much projectile speed, it seems like the glaives have trouble tracking a bit. But once they hit the first target, they slow way down and they just head straight to the next enemy. So if you're facing down, say, like a hallway, you're basically just going to aim at the first enemy like you would normally, and everything behind it is going to get AoE'd. So you can either do like a heat dot build, but I chose to do gas, because as they travel through the enemy going backwards, they're just going to continuously proc gas clouds and that gas dot on everything. I tried it with like a gas electric build, and it was just too many mods required to get it to work. But it was still pretty potent, admittedly. So there's not too much going on with this weapon. The alt fire is super nice, but God, it's gimped by the fact that the charges on it are 20, and there's no way to like get them back, right? I think the max charges should have been like 40 or something, because the magazine is the same, like just double the magazine. It would have felt way nicer with a bigger magazine, because it drains so fast. But those were the builds that I found. And obviously, if you want more raw damage, then you would just swap out for Stormbringer. And it would give you corrosive on the AoE. No, it wouldn't. Hold on. This does pretty well also. Like a big corrosive. It does okay also. You would just try to amp the corrosive damage as high as possible. And because you're basically dealing raw damage, you could even get rid of the faction to make room for like another multiplier, because the faction's only going to give you the damage once, right? But the heat, the corrosive works out pretty well. You could do, and then a heat like this and do corrosive heat. It's still pretty potent. Does fall off a little bit, but you would go over to a merciless, and let's take a look at that. The damage is a little bit more deliberate. The glaives definitely kill a little harder with the direct hit. And for general mission running, it feels pretty good as well. But I like the lingering gas effect. And the weapon does feel like it behaves a little better at way further range. So you would fire directly into the enemy in front of you. Like, say if this podium was the enemy, you would just fire straight into it, and everything basically in a cone behind it would just get AoE'd to death. And by the time the glaives finished bouncing, they would have like enough stacks of corrosive and heat dots that they would just get, you know, mutilated. So not a too exciting glaive, or not a too exciting weapon, but man, it's refreshing. It's definitely an update. I just wish it had like 40. It just had like more magazine, because 20 seems super short. But when you multiply everything out, because you have the multi-shot on the weapon from the modding, and then you have the glaive bounces, it still ends up being a lot of damage. It's just, you're constantly having to swap back and forth. But it is what it is. Still pretty potent. Steel path, it can easily do. Once you get the first hit, everything becomes basically a guaranteed hit after that. And it's a pretty solid weapon. So it can wipe a bunch of 195s, even with no panzer or viral, just straight up heat corrosive. Pretty potent. Anyway, I hope this helped, guys. Anybody was thinking about building this next time because of how late this was. It's a Thursday. But I hope this helps, and simply I hope this helps you with your miter build. Anyway, take it easy, guys. I hope the variations helped. Have a blessed day.